Hello, everyone. Welcome to the state championship edition of High School Sports Saturday here on Sports Radio 105.5 WEEI. I'm your host, Jim Pignatiello, and I'm the high school sports editor at MassLive.com. Thanks for kicking off your weekend with us. We have an absolutely jam-packed, bursting at the seams edition of the show this morning. A little bit later on, we're going to be joined by our Athlete of the Week, TJ Fitzell, South Hadley. He signed his national letter of intent to play lacrosse at Division I Sacred Heart. We will be joined by MassLive.com sports reporter Annie Maroon. We're going to talk about field hockey and today's state championship Division I game that Longmeadow's playing in later this morning. We're also going to be joined even later on by another MassLive sports reporter, Jack. We have a lot of those. A lot of MassLive.com sports reporter, Jack Flagler, who's going to talk about two absolutely epic Division I state championship boys soccer games. But first, I'm now joined by MassLive sports reporter. I told you we had a lot of those. So MassLive.com sports reporter Tom King. Tom, thank you so much for being here.
Great to be here.
And we're going to talk about Western Mass Championship football. Let's start from Division 6. We give a lot of Division 2 coverage. Let's start with Division 6 first, and we'll kind of work our way down or up or however you want to look at it. Turner's Falls, a low seed. They ended up beating Mohawk, a Franklin County rival, 36-22. A low seed, but we kind of coming into the tournament, we felt like they weren't necessarily a normal 4 seed, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, they played a tough schedule. As we've said before, I mean, their only 2 losses were to Division 5 playoff teams, East Hampton, who was in the championship Friday night, and Cathedral, who was also in the Division 5 playoffs. So, I mean, we knew they were a strong team. The 4 seed didn't really do them justice. I think it wasn't really a shock that they won either game.
Yeah, and I think a big thing too that maybe there wasn't as a big deal wasn't necessarily made of it was that they got Trent Borbeau back, their running back. He had an absolutely huge game on Friday night. He almost had like 200 yards, and that makes them so dynamic because Jalen Sanders is a good player. They have a good quarterback in Malcolm Smith, and then when you start to be able to do a couple of things well in Division 6, that really makes your offense pretty dangerous.
Yeah, well, I mean when you have that workhorse back like Borbeau. The defense has to key in on him, or he's going to keep picking up first downs. And when they do start to key in on him, that's when Malcolm Smith and Jalen Sanders can really hit those big plays. And
Borbeau was injured in the East Hampton loss, missed some time, and so that also hurt their seeding. That, and then the fact that they did play. I think the thing that will be brought up as we discuss, as we start to look at how the rankings worked and how all this worked was maybe there's need to be some tweaking because I know in league playing up in league didn't necessarily help you that much, and as we're about to see. Berkshire County has a couple of arguments. I know those guys thought that some of their D6 teams were better than some of the teams that made it in, but their records weren't that good because they played such tough competition.
Yeah, it's tough, especially in D6. I mean, there's a lot of teams with 6 wins, a lot of 6-2 teams. I mean, Greenfield was another tough team that didn't even make the playoffs. So it's really hard when you're looking at teams that don't necessarily play each other and trying to compare across when they don't have many common opponents.
I know that a lot of people thought a lot of Monument, a lot of people thought a lot of Lee, but they just didn't have the wins and losses. But they were playing against the Waconas, Hoosics, Graylocks, and it's so hard to, especially with Berkshire County being so different, having such a diverse number of teams divisionally, to kind of mix and match. It makes Division 6 especially really tough to figure out. So Turners will play on Saturday at Westfield State for their state semifinal game. All the 4 state semifinal games are all on Saturday. Division 6 and Division 2 are both. Not today, Saturday, the following Saturday. The Division 2 and Division 6 are Westfield State, and then Division 4 and Division 5 are at Doyle Field in Leominster. Let's move to Division 5 real quick. East Hampton, Hoosick, we really... I don't think we quite knew what to expect coming out of this game. Hoosick had played a pretty messy game in their semifinals. East Hampton had been rolling over some teams, right? And so... For Hoosick Valley to come up with a 28-8 victory, and I think the touchdown East Hampton scored was a pick 6.
Yeah,
I mean, that's an impressive defensive performance against a really good offensive team in East Hampton.
Yeah, I mean Hoosick in their win over Mount Grey played a very sloppy game as you mentioned before. I mean 5 turnovers, but the defense was there the whole game, and that's the only reason they won. And I was at that game, and I was extremely impressed with how hard they hit. Josh Dalton, a very very good defensive player. It seemed like he lived in the backfield. So. East Hampton and Hoosick are kind of one-dimensional. They love, they're going to run the ball. And so Hoosick Valley was able to slow down Lou Burrell in that rushing attack, and defense really, really came up big.
Lou Burrell has had a monster year. First game of the year, held underneath below 100 yards. First game of the year, he didn't score a touchdown. So it says a lot. For Hoosick Valley, they had two guys go over 100. Ty Mack had a touchdown and 141 yards. And then Matt Brayman had 121 yards and 2 touchdowns. And like you said, just absolute smash mouth. Who can hit you harder? Who's going to punch you in the mouth harder?
Some hits you can hear in the press box. That type of a team.
And so, there'll actually be 2 Berkshire teams heading out to Doyle Field on Saturday. There'll be a Berkshire. It's interesting because these two, Hoosick and Wacona, both are pretty big rivals out that way too.
They played a great game this season earlier.
And they did. That's right. And so both those teams will go out to Doyle Field next Saturday. And because Wacona is coming off of, we mentioned defense before, shut out a really good Agawam offense, 20-0 in their Division IV championship game to win the Western Mass title. Another, good offense that a Berkshire team just absolutely locks down on and really did nothing.
Yeah, Agawam has been they've been racking up points all season. One of the best offenses certainly in the Suburban League, if not in all of Western Mass and Wacona. To hold them scoreless is really a great accomplishment. 3
picks for the Warriors in the game. We talked last week about Ethan Wells, the Wacona quarterback, and the fact that he's such a dual threat. He had a total of 3 touchdowns, 2 rushing, 1 passing, a combined 166 yards. And when you have a quarterback that can really test your defense, and you have a defense that can control the way that you play, you can beat a lot of good teams that way. As far as the Division II game goes, we were at that game on Friday, Central and Westfield. It was only 2 weeks later that they just played for the AA Conference Championship at Central. This time around, Central wins again, 44-20. It looked for a little while like Westfield was going to put a pretty good scare into Central.
Oh, absolutely. They had a great game plan going in, just like what we've been talking about. They had, I think, 9 minutes of possession in that first quarter out of an 11-minute quarter. Central had the ball. They scored a quick touchdown. And that was it. They had 1 possession in the first quarter. So, Westfield had a big 14-7 lead. And then that fumble really was the killer for them.
It was. And as you see kind of time and again, when you have a special team like Central that we've decided long ago that this is a team that has the potential to be pretty special. If you're going to knock off that team, you're going to have to not give them any second chances. You can't give them an extra possession. You can't bail them out. And they did. And right before that, though, you really felt like the momentum was really coming away from Central, and there was some frustration on the sidelines, too.
Yeah, absolutely. Right before the fumble in the end zone, which Daquan Clemens recovered to tie the game for Central, Cody Williams they'd been stopped on 3rd down, and he was pretty animated on the sidelines trying to convince Valdemar Brower to go for it on 4th down. Brower wasn't hearing any of it, but
we made note of it. It was very clear, and you appreciate the competitiveness, but it felt like if Westfield had marched down and put together another one of those drives, that there was the chance that the frustration was going to become trying to do too much, trying to make score 2 touchdowns in one play. You hear about like a basketball trying to make a 25-pointer on one play, and then Westfield has done such a good job all year of not making mistakes and of being so kind of so fundamentally sound.
Yep.
And then it's just a bad pitch, and we still couldn't quite. It was like the Westfield quarterback Jake Toomey looked, and then it was almost like his running back. It wasn't quite where he expected him to be.
It was a little bad timing there. Yeah,
and I don't think we saw that really all year from them.
They've been great with that pitch play all year,
and
they
just
haven't
missed.
had any.
It's like the bounce play. It's like a backdoor cut when the guy doesn't go backdoor in basketball. You throw it out of bounds. You're like, what happened?
Yeah.
It really looked like that.
Exactly like that. Yeah.
And then Clemens was there to dive on it, and just a huge swing of momentum. And it really felt like once you gave Central that extra points, and you just can't do that against that team. And we'd be remiss if we don't talk about Cody Williams. You mentioned him, 344 yards, a total of 5 touchdowns, 4 in the air, and really spread the ball out nicely. They were converting 3rd and long, they were converting 4th and long to a bunch of different guys.
He was fantastic. The offensive line gave him a lot of time. Westfield also was dropping a lot of defensive backs in coverage at times, but for Central, he's clearly the top quarterback in the region, and it seems like they've kind of been holding him back throughout the season. They haven't had any close games, so they haven't really needed to show anything through the air. But Western Mass Championship game, they let him loose, and he showed why he's the top player.
There's been some, we just kind of went through this, so I'm interested in asking you your opinion. You don't see a lot of Western Mass Championships at home sites. It's kind of the way the system is because of the way this money split goes and kind of the first year of things. I think they didn't want to have 3 weeks of planning sites and things, with all these games that were today. Did you feel like it was an okay situation today? Did it feel weird to be giving out trophies at Central to Central? What did you think of that?
Yeah, it was interesting. I mean, it wasn't the greatest crowd. We've been to a bunch of Central games this season, and it was probably the least attended of all the games. So, I mean,
on a pretty nice night. It wasn't like a frigid night or anything.
No, it was pretty warm, but it didn't really change the atmosphere. But yeah, I do like when you have the neutral site. It just makes it gives that a little extra edge to the game. I think a little extra. I don't know.
It feels special. It doesn't feel like another game. Yeah, right. I hear what you're saying.
Plus, and you look at the Division 4, Agawam has to travel, an hour to get out to Dalton for the Wacona game. That's a tough away game in a championship game.
All the Berkshire people right now are saying, too bad. How many times have we gone to the Cage for basketball? How many times have we gone to UMass for something? Us Pioneer Valley people in South they always complain. Oh, man, have we heard complaints about that. But so, with Westfield, I mean, you don't want to kind of undermine what a great season they had. I mean, you run into a team that has been building to this point. It's been the Central team that's been building to this season with this group of seniors and kind of the depth that they have and just kind of the strength of the program. But what a nice year Westfield had. I mean, you clearly can't say enough about the season that the Bombers have had for Bill Moore. They
were fantastic. I mean, it's in Bill Moore's final season, it's a great way for him to go out. Just a great group of seniors. It's just a disciplined, hardworking bunch. I mean, they don't wow you in any one way. They just kind of go about their business. And I mean, nobody was going to beat Central this year. I mean, I think as we alluded to, it would have taken a perfect set of events for Central to lose. But Westfield had a great season. Hopefully, they got the Thanksgiving Day game against Cathedral. Hopefully, they'll send out Coach Moore in the right way.
So obviously a really nice Friday night for Berkshire County football. I mean, they would be pretty excited to have two of the four teams going on. Central team that we kind of all expected, and the Turner's Falls team that had a great start, was a question mark, was a 4 seed. Did you learn anything new this week about this week about these teams, about kind of the landscape? Anything that stood out to you that surprised you?
I would say that week to week, you never know what you're going to get. You look at Hoosick Valley last week, they had 5 turnovers, and then they come out and they just play a fantastic game and win there in Division 5.
On the road at Williston, yeah.
Yep, and you look at Turner's Falls, a team that in the last week of the regular season, Cathedral beat 54-7, I think, something, just they got manhandled.
Yeah.
And, they turn it around, and now they're the Division 6 Western Mass champions, so.
And as far as the non-qualifying games and the way that all worked, I think considering how this was relatively thrown together, considering that they're still trying to kind of figure things out, I think it worked out pretty well. They were able to find some good matchups. We talked, I mentioned in the interview later on in the show with TJ Fitzell, who we taped the interview with him before Saturday morning because we was going to make him get up early. We talked about kind of being eliminated and then coming back and having to play. It looked great to have him on this week because he scored 5 touchdowns against Holyoke. But they were able to find some interesting matchups in that way. I mean, that was a rivalry game. I think that was a no-brainer, right? That was a rivalry game that didn't get played for the first time in maybe forever this year until this week. It seemed like there were they were able to do that though. There were some interesting matchups. There were some good matchups. And I think that, if you have to do it this way, they were able to do a pretty good job.
Yeah, I think they did a really, really good job. I mean, it's not easy to logistically to put it all together with the state tournament and all the Thanksgiving Day games, which nobody wants to lose because those are always great. And I think it's worked out pretty well. The matchups were competitive for the most part. And, it sets up these kids are going to be prepared and they don't have those 3-week layoff before Thanksgiving Day game, so I think it'll work out well.
And I did ask TJ, one of the reasons I want to have him on this week was the mindset of that they had to go from being a tournament team to a non-tournament team and playing a game, and it was interesting to get that perspective, and I think that's where this all feels a little weird to people.
Yeah, that's where it's going to be
And so it was interesting to hear, and I'm not going to give away everything that he said, but it was interesting to hear what he had to say about it, that you only get so many games as a high school football player, and so to kind of look at it that way and to appreciate that you can put the pads on an extra time instead of having to wait an extra week and then wait for Thanksgiving. I think that was an interesting way to look at it that maybe I didn't as a person who's been out of high school for so long and doesn't necessarily look at it that way. But I think that was interesting to get that take on him. As I said, we have a lot coming up. So first, though, we have to pay bills because you can't be on the radio if you're not going to pay your bills, sir. So we're going to take a break. And when we come back, we'll be joined by the aforementioned WEEI Springfield Athlete of the Week, TJ Fitzell of South Hadley. right when we come back on Sports Radio WEEI. Welcome back to High School Sports Saturday here on 105.5 WEEI. It's now time to check in with this week's WEEI Springfield Athlete of the Week, TJ Fitzell of South Hadley High School. TJ is a senior 3-sport athlete for the Tigers. He just signed this week his national letter of intent to play men's lacrosse at Sacred Heart University. TJ, thank you for joining us.
It's nice to be here.
TJ, just kind of take us through the decision. What got you to make the decision to go to Sacred Heart, play there?
Well, it was a real easy decision for me. I really liked the coaching staff. That was number one. I wanted to go somewhere where I liked the coaches and I felt comfortable with them. I really liked the campus. The facilities were awesome. So it was kind of easy decision for me to make.
When did they come on your radar? What was the process like?
Sacred Heart came on my radar summer going into junior year. I was playing some summer lacrosse, and they sent me an email. I wrote back to them, showing interest, and we just took it from there. I went on a visit that summer, and then later that winter of my junior year, I went on an overnight visit, and it was just a great time. I had a lot of fun with the guys. They're easygoing kids, and it's just a really good fit, I think, for me.
And when did you give them your verbal commitment?
I gave them my verbal commitment last spring during lacrosse season. And then just kind of went from there. Oh, I gave them my verbal commitment to Coach Mariano, who is no longer there.
Right, okay.
And so I was kind of undecided at that point when he left, but when Coach Lassie came into the picture, I knew I was going to come back to Sacred Heart because he was a guy that had recruited me to go to Hartford, and he wanted me still at Sacred Heart, so it was a win-win.
Oh, great. That's cool how that worked out then for you. That's awesome.
Yeah.
You also, of course, play football and you play basketball. Did you always feel like if you were going to play at the next level, it would be lacrosse, or at what point did that kind of start to make itself clear for you?
I had no idea. I had always loved lacrosse. Lacrosse is my passion. Lacrosse is my number one sport, I felt. But, I kept my options open. I never received any interest in basketball, but I had a couple of D3 colleges looking at me for football. So I was kind of up in the air, but, I felt like playing Division I in college was always my dream. So I had my best shot at lacrosse, and lacrosse is my passion, so I just went with it.
Now, you had a pretty, I was looking all these things up, and you had a pretty incredible junior year, from an athletic standpoint. You and the football team, you guys you didn't just get to the Super Bowl, you played at Gillette, right?
Yeah, that was a great feeling.
Yeah, the basketball team played in the state finals.
Yep.
And the lacrosse team, you guys made it to the Western Mass final. As this was all happening, did you kind of get a sense of what a special kind of circumstance this all was, or did it not take until after the fact at the end of the entire school year and that sort of thing?
Yeah, you really don't embrace these things until it's over. When you're preparing to play at Gillette, when you're preparing to play in a state finals game or a Western Mass game, you're just focusing on winning that game, and then after the fact, win or lose, you kind of look back and reflect on it and how great of a moment it was. So I don't think I really realized until probably the end of the year how well my junior year went and how good of teams we had collectively. It was just a special year for me in general.
Can you even pick a highlight out of that? Is there any comparison between playing at Gillette versus playing in a state final for basketball, or is it just
state finals was a great feeling. I think winning that semifinals game though was probably the highlight of that year. I had a great game. Evan Marcus had a great game. Our bigs played great. We made school history, becoming the first South Hadley team to ever play in the state finals.
Right.
So that was pretty special to me, to be on a team that made history. So that was pretty special.
Have you grown up as a Patriots fan? Is that your football team that you root for?
Oh, yeah, of course. And playing in Gillette, that's a dream come true. Don't get me wrong, but there were so many special moments in my junior year. Choosing one is pretty difficult.
No, of course. What was that like? What did you do? What did you notice at Gillette? What did you kind of experience that maybe the people who are in the stands or something wouldn't have necessarily picked up on?
Well, you don't realize how big the stadium is until you're standing in the middle of that field looking up at those lights. It's massive. Like, you watch it on TV and you see the stadium from aerial view, and it looks big, but you don't actually get a sense of how big that stadium is until you're standing in the middle of the field playing a game. It's a phenomenal feeling.
Do you ever, at any point in the game, do you get lost in the game? Do you ever forget that you're there, or is it always kind of, are you always aware of that?
I was always aware of, what was at stake and where I'm playing, but, my main focus is on the game.
Sure.
I think before the game I might have, wow, we're playing at Gillette. We warmed up in the practice bubble that they have, and that's another big facility, a nice facility. So I think it's hard not to keep focused, but I try my best to keep focused on the main goal at task.
We're going to give our listeners a little bit of a peek behind the curtain. We do run early on Saturday mornings from 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock in the morning. We're talking to TJ in midweek because I wasn't going to remotely ask him to get up at 7 o'clock in the morning and be on the radio. But TJ, I wanted to ask you, because it's become kind of the thing that this state football tournament is hinging on, is kind of the teams that are no longer in the tournament. You guys played in a postseason game last week. You played a great game and almost knocked off an undefeated Wacona team. And now you're getting ready for a game that isn't in the tournament. I mean, how has the kind of emotional swings been? Are you happy with the way the guys have responded, and that to get ready to play again this weekend?
Well, I don't know if you know who we're playing. We're playing Holyoke, so
right.
That doesn't. There doesn't need to be much behind that game to get us pumped up. It's Battle of the Bridge, South Hadley Holyoke. This is a rivalry that has been ongoing for a little while. So we're amped up. So we'll be ready to play.
No, you guys did not play them in the regular season?
No, we didn't play them this regular season because of the new format with the playoffs.
And that's probably the first time in who knows how long that South Hadley and Holyoke hadn't played each other in the regular season, right?
Yeah, it's been a while, and I was a little bummed that we weren't going to have the chance to play them this regular season.
Sure.
Because, you open up the season Friday night against Holyoke, and it was a different feeling this year. But just getting the chance to play them, I'm pretty excited.
Do you feel like that is kind of the difference, though? I mean, I'm just trying to get a sense from a player's perspective. If it was a regular team, would it not be the same, or do you still feel like it's worthwhile to be playing a game after the end of the tournament, after the tournament ends for you?
I think it's definitely worth it because being a senior, I have 2 football games left in my career.
Sure.
I'll never put on those pads again, so I'm going to make the most out of it. I'm going to enjoy every second, every play, every down. It's going to be a special feeling, and I'm going to play my heart out.
The success of the football team over the last decade, or even longer, but in the recent history, it always kind of ends up running into basketball season, right? Because there's you guys missed some practice last year because you were getting ready for the Super Bowl, correct?
Yep.
And so, with the way things are now, I mean, do you feel like maybe the basketball team will be able to kind of be on the same page and get rolling a little earlier because there isn't that overlap of the football season and the end of football season and the beginning of tryouts?
Yeah, it gives us a week that we never had.
Sure.
We always kind of ended a week late due to being in playoffs and stuff like that. So having that extra week to prepare for our first game, get some chemistry down, get in rhythm with your teammates, it's a huge it's a huge benefit, because basketball is all about rhythm and getting to know your teammates, and especially when you only got 5 guys on the court, you got to be in sync with one another. So that extra week helps us a lot.
Awesome. Hey, good stuff from TJ Fitzell. Thank you so much, TJ, for joining us this week. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, it's time for another break. When we return, I will be joined by Annie Maroon from MassLive. We're going to talk some Longmeadow field hockey and some other stuff with her, and we'll be right back here on Sports Radio WEEI. Welcome back to High School Sports Saturday here on Sports Radio WEEI. I'm joined now by MassLive high school sports reporter Annie Maroon, who is making her debut on the show. Thanks for joining us, Annie.
Yeah, no problem. Glad to be here.
Annie's done a great job for us covering field hockey this season. We wanted to check in with her heading into today's State Division I championship game between Longmeadow and Walpole. Game is set for bright and early. It is breakfast. Well, I guess if you're listening to this, it's bright and early too. But it is breakfast and field hockey on Saturday here. It's at WPI in Worcester. And you've kind of been following the Longmeadow run here. What have you seen? What have you gotten out of that team? What's impressed you about them?
I mean, they've been the best team in Western Mass. It was no surprise to see them walk away with the Division I title. They have the top scorer in this half of the state. That's Jessie Moriarty, who's a junior. She had a hat trick in Longmeadow's state semifinal win over Shrewsbury on Tuesday. She's a very fast player, goes the ball very well, but there's so much more to the team than that. They have a ton of scoring depth. Their defense moves the ball up really well, and they're just able to really pressure teams.
Longmeadow 20-1 going into the game against Walpole, and it was kind of doubly sweet in the state semifinals, right, to beat a Shrewsbury team that had knocked them off to end last season in the tournament. Right,
yeah. I talked to Jessie Moriarty and to the head coach, Ann Simons, after the game, and the first thing that both of them mentioned was getting revenge on the team that knocked them off last year. Shrewsbury beat them 1-0 last year in the state semis, and it was Shrewsbury scored on their only shot of the game, while Longmeadow kind of dominated the game, so they were definitely really pleased to come back and avenge that.
That was a 4-1 victory for Longmeadow in the state semifinal. Did they kind of pinpoint what the difference was this time around? Was it just that they were able to convert the chances that they got again, or was there other things that they did differently?
I think it was just converting, really. Yeah, last year they had brought the pressure, but they hadn't been able to score, and Shrewsbury was known as a really strong defensive team, was able to shut them down. But this year, especially in the second half, it was just all Longmeadow. It was sort of only a matter of time till they broke through.
And as you mentioned, Moriarty with a hat trick against Shrewsbury. Is she the kind of player that scores from a certain position on a certain shot, or is she the kind of person that you see kind of finish in a lot of different ways?
It's kind of from everywhere, really. One of her goals, she sort of carried in the state semifinal. She sort of carried the ball in herself and just sort of ripped a shot from the top of the circle. Another one was off a corner, and she was in a little bit closer. She's able to get rebounds. She's able to make plays with her teammates. She's very, very versatile that way.
And now, going into the tournament, or in the tournament, you wrote a nice feature on Jillian Sokorka, right?
Yep.
Yeah, good pronunciation.
That is the
Joe.
Pronunciation.
I've worked on that all week.
Yes.
An interesting story. Someone who hadn't played field hockey before this year. What did you kind of learn about her? What brought you to that story?
Well, she scored a goal in their regional semifinal. They played Agawam, and Longmeadow fell behind early in the game, and she scored to kind of get them back in it. And I was really impressed with her. I thought she looked like one of the team's best players. I was talking to Coach Simons about her, and she mentioned that Jill had not played field hockey at all before this year, but that she was going to Harvard to play lacrosse. And so that really struck me, and I thought it'd be interesting to talk to her. And she told me that just a couple days before the season started, her friends had been trying to convince her to join the field hockey team, and she thought, hey, what the heck, why not? And she joined up, and she scored 15 goals this year, which was second on the team. So obviously the athleticism that's made her such a great lacrosse player carried over to field hockey, and she's been a really key player.
Well, it's really interesting, too, because if you don't, you can get the very basics of field hockey by just watching a game, but there are so many specific rules about how you can use the stick and how you can play defense and where the ball can go and how you can touch the ball. Mm-hmm. It's kind of interesting and impressive that someone could take to it the way that she has as a newcomer.
Right, and she mentioned sort of the physicality or the lack thereof in field hockey.
Sure.
Because, I can speak from experience. I, in high school, played basketball and ice hockey before I played field hockey, and getting used to not using your body to block the ball or like to, sort of box players out is really tough, and she mentioned that as well, that was the main thing. She had to just sort of tone it down and not be so aggressive, not, push people off the ball or use her stick as much to sort of knock other players' sticks away. So she said that was the toughest thing for her.
But I think that bringing that kind of level of toughness, though, as even though you can't maybe physically do much with it, but it's still that kind of mental toughness and things that seems to be paying off for Longmeadow again.
Absolutely, yeah. You can see it when she's out on the field that she goes the ball very aggressively. It's not that she's throwing elbows or anything like that, but she just pursues the ball. She gets there. She's very fast, and she's not afraid to just sort of battle for the ball.
And what a special year for Longmeadow. The coach gets to, Ann Simons gets her, was it 400th career victory? They get to run to the state finals. It's clearly one of the better, they've had a number of fantastic seasons, but clearly one of their better teams all around. What a special year for a special program.
Right, yeah. Coach Simons called it a team of destiny when I talked to her the other night. She said that, this is a young team. They have a couple of key seniors, but a lot of their scoring has come from underclassmen, but it's just been a team that really caught fire at the beginning of the year and never really looked back.
And, the thing that jumped out at me during the regular season was when Longmeadow would play some of the better Division II teams, some of the better other teams in Western Mass, a Frontier, a Smith Academy, and Northampton, they would always be pretty close games over the course of the last 10 years, and then they'd still make these runs and do well, obviously. But this year, it felt like they were dominating even the very best opponents in Western Mass, and that kind of showed me even relatively early on in the season that this could be a team that could win a state championship for Longmeadow.
Right, and we saw that in the Western Mass Finals where they played Minnechaug, who was a very good team. Played a great game against Northampton to get into the finals, but then they ran up against Longmeadow, and Minnechaug didn't get a shot the entire game. Like Longmeadow basically had the ball in their end the whole time. There really was no chance of Minnechaug beating them. So yeah, they were really dominant.
What does that take when you're covering that? I mean, is it just about what does it take to lock in a good team like Minnechaug like that for such a long period of time?
I mean, you got to be able to move the ball well. You've got to, your defense is a key part of it. You talk about the offense so much with a team like that, but it's also crucial. You have to have your defenders in your midfield be able to be ready and send the ball back in and move the ball well to keep it moving up in the offensive end for you guys. So
you'll want to keep track of Annie's coverage from the state championship game. Again, Longmeadow is going to be playing bright and early, so you'll want to keep track of that on Twitter, on MassLive.com. Annie, I also want to get your take on Smith Academy and their run to Division II, though, before we let you go. They weren't able to advance to the state finals, but it was still a great run for the Falcons, and they had what sounded like an absolute classic in the Western Mass Finals against Frontier, correct?
Right. That game was one of the best games I've covered in a while. It went right down to the wire. Smith was leading 1-0 till the final minutes of the game. Frontier scored on a corner with no time left in regulation to send it to overtime. And then it was Danielle Dussault, who's the best player in Division II in Western Mass, who scored to win the game for Smith. And even though they lost to Auburn 4-0, the score makes it look like a blowout, but it really wasn't. Auburn kind of ran away with it at the end, but Smith was right with them for most of the game, maybe even better. They just they had some bad luck with some scoring chances that Auburn was able to convert, and they weren't.
And you do wonder about the momentum in the case of the Frontier Smith game. Sometimes a team scores like that, and it's such a lift to them that they come right out and score quickly. Were you impressed with the way Smith responded and were able to kind of battle back and win it in overtime in that final?
I was impressed with that because Frontier had kind of been knocking on the door the whole second half. They had something like 12 corners in the second half. They were really all over them, and then finally got it at the end. So you could definitely see that as lifting them up. But the thing with field hockey overtime is it's 7-on-7 instead of having you have fewer players out there on the field. So with a player like Danielle Dussault, who's that fast and moves the ball that well, that really plays in her favor because she has more time and space to sort of make things happen.
So Frontier clearly didn't go down. I mean, they were the two-time defending champions. They clearly didn't give it up without a fight. Pretty impressive for them to fight the way they did.
Right. I was really impressed by them. And they're a really strong defensive team as well. Just watching them in the Western Mass semifinal against Mohawk, they get their sticks down and you can't get through them. That's definitely a very, very good team that Smith beat to advance.
You mentioned the change to 7-on-7 versus, was it 7-on-7? I think it's 7-on-7 including the goalie, right?
Including the goalie, right.
You mentioned the change. I mean, could you immediately see the difference with Danielle Dussault having that much space and that just kind of being able to make such a difference right away, or did it take a little time to see how it was going to play out?
It takes a couple of minutes to get rolling in overtime, but you could see on the rush where they were coming down the field there, it was her sister who sent the ball ahead to her, and they had, you could just sort of see the field open up for them for a good passing team. That's just sort of the way it happens.
So an end of a really great season for Smith Academy, which beat Frontier 3 times in a row.
Mm-hmm.
That was the fourth time they'd played this year. A rivalry game, and it was just as intense the last time, of course, because they're playing for a title. But always fun when they play. It was cool to see them, as someone who had covered a lot of their matches, to see them going for the finals and to be able to follow what a classic game that was. Annie, is there anything specific that you're really looking forward to with this final before we wrap up with the Longmeadow Walpole game?
I mean, it's going to be a fantastic game. Walpole's coming into this game undefeated, and the team that they beat to make it here was Acton-Boxborough, which is the only team that beat Longmeadow this season. So obviously this is the cream of the crop playing. It'll just be interesting to see if Longmeadow's attack, can get through what is the best team in Eastern Massachusetts. They're obviously a dominant offensive team. They're very fast. They move the ball well. So it'll be interesting to see how Walpole can handle them. Follow
Annie's coverage on MassLive.com. Follow her on Twitter at Annie_Maroon. That is 1 R and 2 O's. I've learned this in the last couple weeks.
Just like the color.
Exactly. And we're going to take a break now, though, and pay some bills. When we come back, MassLive's Jack Flagler will be joining us. We're going to break down what happened in Friday night state championship soccer games and look forward to the Saturday games as well. Right here on Sports Radio WEEI. Welcome back to High School Sports Saturday here on Sports Radio 105.5 WEEI. Tom King and Jim Pignatiello here, and we are joined now on the phone by Jack Flagler, another MassLive.com reporter who is in the middle of a crazy couple of days of soccer. He saw 2 absolute classic Division I championship games on Friday night. West Springfield coming up with the Division I state title in extra penalty kicks, and the Minnechaug girls also going to extra penalty kicks and falling. I don't know that I've ever seen either that happen in back-to-back games, especially with that kind of thing on the line. And then on Saturday, of course, we have 2 more state championships involving Western Mass teams, the Granby girls in Division III and the Belchertown boys in Division III. And we'll get to that in just a few. But, Jack, first I just want to ask you about Friday night. I mean, just can you kind of take us through the night and just kind of what that was like to see the, it was both games were 0-0 through regulation and overtime, but was it just were they both similar? Was it different kinds of games? How do you kind of wrap that up?
Yeah, I guess they were similar kinds of games, Jim, in that they were played extremely evenly, and that's I guess obvious because of the score lines and playing so much soccer without any goals in regulation. But there was a lot of possession in the midfield. Not a whole lot of opportunities on net. And then the opportunities that the teams did get, they were just a few in either game. It wasn't like they missed 8 or 9 or 10 chances. It was 1 or 2, and there were excellent plays on the parts of all 4 teams to keep the ball out of the net and get it to PKs. Obviously, in our perspective here from Western Mass, you had totally different perspectives from the teams. West Springfield, of course, just ecstatic after the win, after not even winning a regional title for so long, and Minnetonka just devastated. But that's the reality of penalty kicks. It's essentially a coin flip when you get to that point. But one team, when you get this far into the tournament, is going to be going home devastated, and one team is going to be, ecstatic.
Let's start a little bit with the agony of defeat in Minnetonka. Was the mood that it is a coin flip? Was the mood it's awful that it has to be determined on PKs? How were they kind of feeling after the fact?
Yeah, well, the head coach Nundy Gonsalves told me after the game, somebody has to win. It has to be decided somehow, but that's his perspective as a coach. I think it's really tough to have that as a player, right after the game. Obviously, they were devastated. They went to 6 PKs. 2 of the shots hit the crossbar, so it's not like they were missing by much. The goalie made an excellent save. Ana Maria Ribeiro on Minnetonka's end made some great saves as well. So, the girls were devastated. They had gotten so far, and thought that they were going to be able to bring home the first title in 5 years for that program, and to come up so close and come up just short. Obviously, when you go through a moment like that, it's horrible as a player. But I think, as you said, Jim, with a little bit of time, they're going to realize that they got so far to this point and accomplished so much that the sting kind of wears off, and then you realize what you accomplished. But in the moment, of course, they were just devastated after the loss.
As far as the regulation play goes, was there anyone that stood out to you that specifically dominated or played particularly well for Minnetonka in the field? You said there was a lot of possession in the midfield, that sort of thing.
There was. Taylor Coopy, who's a senior who played her last game, played an excellent game for Minnetonka in the back line. Their midfielders did a nice job of tackling, but Coopy is the center back. She maybe made the play of the game. It came early in the first half, so we didn't really know how the game was going to go. But she headed the ball off the back line after Ribeiro had come out aggressively and charged out to try to cut down an angle. The ball got by her, and it appeared to be going in, and Coopy headed the ball out. So if you get an early goal, it seemed like the kind of game that Newton North, maybe could have run away with, when you get up like that. But they kept the ball out of the net and just sort of traded possession for the rest of the game and just locked down that really tough attack for Newton North, who's a very skilled, very talented team. They had more opportunities than Newton North did in the second half and overtime, but I think keeping them off the scoreboard in the first half kind of dictated the way the rest of the game went. So Taylor Coopy had an excellent game.
And it is kind of funny how, as you're kind of covering the game, you see a moment like that when it's 0-0 and it's big, but you don't know until like 100 minutes later that it ends up being like the best chance of the day, right?
Exactly. It could be 3-2 at the end of the game, and it's a footnote, that she headed it out in the 15th or 20th minute. But as the game went, obviously it was it extended the game. I guess it didn't end up deciding the game since Newton North won it anyway in penalty kicks, but it certainly made it a lot closer than it would have been otherwise.
Now, you were, of course, at Worcester State with Terrence Payne, another one of the I'm mentioning every MassLive reporter in this episode apparently today.
Get them all in there.
But you and Terrence Payne were at the games on Friday night. You'll be at the games again on Saturday. And, were you guys kind of looking at each other late in the second half, like, are we really, during the boys' game, and thinking, are we really about to see this again?
it was sort of that way. Exactly, Jim. It was similar, in the way that the style of play was going, that there weren't many opportunities and there were just a couple excellent defensive plays. Alex Craver was unbelievable in net for West Springfield, as he has been all year. But in this game in particular, he just made some acrobatic saves that really kept this one going and got it to PKs, including one where he came out almost all the way to the end of the 18-yard box in the second half. There was a rebound opportunity for Somerville. It seemed like they had, excellent scoring chance. Looked like they were going to go on top 1-0, and he came out and cut down the angle from way further than you ever thought he would come out. So, you get one or two opportunities, and West Springfield shut them down, and it was sort of the same story in that game as it was in the first. But another really well played soccer game between two very strong teams. But yeah, when it was scoreless and going down to the end, it was kind of unbelievable that both of them followed the same path.
And, it makes sense that Craver had such a great game because it's really been a soccer tournament of star players coming through in huge moments. I mean, you have, Alex DeSantis with a hat trick for Belchertown in the state semifinals. We'll talk about them in a few minutes. But, that's one. You have, Tyler Zimkowitz for Hopkins having the only goal in a 1-0 win against Munson. You had all, some of the best players on the girls team stepping up the way they did.
Had the overtime goal for
Munson. Exactly. There's so many of these games where the kids who have kind of led the way stepped up, and it with Craver really is kind of one of the guys who's been the heart and soul of that program. So for him to have a monster game and to have it come down to PKs when the goalie is such a huge part of that and in the middle of everything, it just kind of makes sense with the way that this story has been written all postseason, doesn't it?
Yeah, it definitely does, and I think that's the reason, Jim, that they're star players, not just because Brooke Murphy put up 45 goals in the regular season. It's because she steps up in moments like that. For Munson, the same thing for Craver. It's not because he made a bunch of saves if they won a 5-0 game in September. It's because he's a star because he stepped up in moments like last night on Friday night. So it absolutely is true that the Stars really came out and put their teams over the top, and that's why they're stars in the first place.
So it goes to PKs, and it was. Once it gets to extra PKs, it really changes things, right? It becomes a it's best of 5 to start. They're still even, and then it becomes 1-for-1, and then you kind of, if you're still tied after that, you keep going. But man, that's got to be some pressure moments for both. They both went to extra PKs. That's going to be unbelievable.
They went to 7 in the boys, and they went to 6 for the girls. And like you said, the pressure was just intense for everyone. Everyone who missed sort of held their head in their hands, and everyone who made it sort of leapt off the field and ran back to the line of players who were lined up behind them. So yeah, that's the kind of moments that on that stage that these players will definitely remember. I guess for better or for worse, but in West Springfield's case, definitely one that they'll remember for the rest of their lives in a good way.
I don't think I've ever been to a championship game decided on PKs where it ended up feeling horrible for a bunch of people. Like there's just no way to walk away.
It seems like there's got to be a better way in the tournament to do that. It's like if you're playing a basketball game and it goes to overtime, we just have a free throw shooting contest to see who wins.
Yeah, I agree with you, Tom. But in the way these games were going, where there are so few chances on either side, I think if you kept playing the girls' game, I'd probably still be covering the boys right now on Saturday morning. So unfortunately, somebody has to end it in some way.
Well, and it's interesting because it wasn't that long ago that the state once you got to the state championship, if it was tied after double overtime, it was just co-champs. And actually, the year after it changed was the last time that the Belchertown boys were in the state finals. It was either 04 or 05. I'm getting old. All these years are running together. They went and they lost to Stoneham in extra PKs. It was like 7 or 8 penalty kicks they lost after a 0-0 regulation. And, to a man, I did have to ask everybody, to a man, they all said they would have rather lost in PKs and been co-champs, which was really interesting.
I think they should just do 8-on-8 and
like field hockey, just keep pulling guys off.
Keep pulling them off there until somebody gets a goal.
What do you think, Jack?
I like it. I like the idea. I think we should roll with it for next year. Pitch it to the MIA.
Jack just wanted to be home before 2 o'clock on Friday night. That's all he cared. He didn't care how it happened. So you're going.
That's right. Get some sleep before
before Saturday's games.
Absolutely. This crazy weekend of soccer. Yeah.
So Jack, we're as we mentioned, you're going back to Worcester, a different stadium, but you're going back to the same city on Saturday. What do you think about the 3 o'clock, the Granby Newburyport girls Division III game?
Yeah, it's tough with these state finals, to know how a team on the other side of the state does. But I think in Newburyport, I think we can be pretty sure that this is an extremely strong team that's coming in. They won state titles in 2007 and 2008. They're back in D3 now, looking to win again. But that said, definitely not counting out Granby. This is the first time any of those girls have been there. It's the first time the school has been on that stage. So, they understand the gravity of the moment. I don't think they'll come out with nerves. I think they'll come out excited and, ready to play. After winning that Western Mass title, I think they really wanted that goal, and now they're ready for another one. So I think it'll be a tightly contested game. I'm expecting, maybe another pretty defensive game, as Granby likes to play that way, winning 1-0 in the Western Mass title and then beating Holy Name 1-0 also. But, we'll see. It's tough with these teams you haven't seen before coming from places like Newburyport, but we can be pretty sure that that's going to be a strong side.
We talked about star players, and at 5:30, the Belchertown boys take on Medway, and Tom and I saw this at the state semifinals. You can't believe Alex DeSantis' left foot until you've seen it. It'd be really interesting to see in his final high school game what he'll do, because we've had him on the show already. He's just, and he doesn't look like an absolute superstar, but he is, and to get one last crack on the state final, pretty special thing. Of course, also on Saturday, we've got Division III volleyball. Frontier going for a 4th straight state championship. They're going to be playing at noon at Algonquin, and we talked to Andy Maroon about this already, but Longmeadow Division I field hockey is playing at WPI at 10 a.m. That is actually going to wrap it up. As I said, we're bursting at the seams today. It feels like we just started. We really appreciate you starting your weekend with us here on High School Sports Saturday on Sports Radio 105.5 EEI. You can follow MassLive High School coverage at MassLiveHS on Twitter. You can follow Tom King at @ByThomasKing, Jack Flagler at Jack Flagler, and myself, Jim Pignatiello, at J Pignatiello. We once again do not have time for me to spell it. Sorry about that. As always, thank you to everyone here at WEEI Springfield, especially our producer, Mark Leake. Thank you for listening, and please have a great weekend.